What's up, YouTube? So, today I want to talk a little bit about an argument I often hear in position. The argument is Luke is a powerful superhero. He's perfect. All he does is he performs these outrageously powerful feats. This is an argument one can make because I used to believe in this argument before I became an EU fan. When they actually haven't read it, this is one of those arguments that you give when you don't read the EU. Um, they're talking, of course, post Jedi Luke, and here's one thing that is true. Yes, Luke has some unbelievably powerful feats of strength in the expanded universe, undeniable. But that is everything that we got with Luke in the EU. We didn't get any story with him. Is ridiculous. In fact, I'd argue that most of Luke's story in the post Jedi era has nothing to do with even being with him. We see a lot more character moments with him. It's not. A lot of it isn't him even using a lightsaber, or it is their character moments we get with him throughout most of it. Um, and then of course they argue that he's perfect. Luke is not perfect in the expanded universe. The amount of Jedi apprentices he loses is a lot. I can't even count it on two hands. There's a lot. There's Brackus, there's Queller, there's Hawtaran for a brief period. There's so many, right? Of Jedi apprentices that he lost. Now, some of them were redeemed, yes. Kip Darn. Um, but he did lose them for a brief period of time, and they caused chaos. Um, and then, of course, there were some he couldn't redeem, like Brackus. And I think the most infamous is Darth Caedus, right? He couldn't redeem Caedus. Caedus was just one. Um, I think that was probably the worst of his failures. Is Darth Caedus, his own family, right? Someone he trained as a Jedi from when he did. Um, Obviously, that perfect argument is ridiculous. Doesn't make sense. Um, and he does go through a lot of character development. In the New Jedi Order, Luke went from someone who was kind of afraid to step up to the Vong to someone who just destroyed Vong left and right. And because initially, and his argument was he didn't want to be on the offensive, and he was worried because of what happened to him in Dark Empire. He was worried that if they did go on the offensive, then they would turn to the dark side. His Jedi Order would, and it would collapse. That was his worry. But then he saw Kip's Jedi, his Kip's dozen, as it's called, and they're over here launching this huge offensive. Even though it was, obviously disobeying Luke, but it worked, and they were, Kip was winning a lot of those battles. Um, and then eventually Luke made, I think, his biggest mistake in the war, and he, blames himself, was allowing Anakin to lead a strike team on Merkur. And spoiler alert, but Anakin dies, right? So, and Luke blames himself for that, and he always blames he blames himself, not being directly responsible, indirectly being responsible for his death. Um, Even though it was Anakin who gave his life, he didn't have to do that, but Luke blames himself for that. So he does go through this character arc in the New Jedi Order. I can't really comment on anything going forward because I haven't read it yet, but I can comment on the New Jedi Order. And that alone proves that he's not that. And I know later on he'll go through other character stuff. Um, but yeah, and then you even look at the Bantam era. In the Bantam era, they didn't want to use his power. They tried to restrict it. The Luke problem that they had. Um, he was so powerful. It's like, well, why does anything matter? They tried to restrict his power. They didn't want him to be a superhero. They wanted to give him some character, and they wanted to give him a proper story, and for the most part, they did. I feel like in Timothy Zahn's books, that was probably the best. The best. Well, yeah, I think that was the best use of Luke was in the Zahn novels, um, because it just felt so much like the movies. Um, but the point is, there's just no basis for this argument. There's just none. It's an argument where it's an argument that is put together by people who they read like a Screen Rant article or they see something on YouTube, top 10 most powerful feats Luke does in Legends or something like that. And then they think that's all he is when that's not at all. I don't even blame the articles, to be honest. I blame people for thinking that that's everything that Luke is in, that's all he does in the EU. That's not true. Um, I think this is because, and the reason why I'm kind of passionate about this argument, I've talked about it before, but it's because I believed it going into when I first started reading it. I'm like, wait, that argument has no bearing because so many of these stories that I was reading, they weren't like that. In fact, most of the books don't even have Luke using any super powerful force powers. I mean, he uses the force, right, with the finesse of a Jedi Master, but it's nothing like what I was told. Um, I just see this argument all the time, and it has no basis in reality. It's based on, well, I haven't read the EU. That's what it's based on. They haven't read the EU, right? And it's just kind of sick. It's sickening because it's like, why are you going to criticize something that you haven't even read? You know, it's like with me. I don't criticize the new canon books and comics because I haven't read them. Am I going to read them? Probably not. Now, I mean, there are some I read, but I don't care enough about them to comment on them anyway. Um, but it's like if I can give new canon fans that same respect, they should give the EU that same respect. And it has nothing to do with even respect. It's just common sense. Don't talk about something you haven't read. Right now, if you've read it and you're still making that argument, well, I question how much you actually comprehended because that's just not true. Luke is not a superhero. He goes on this very beautiful story throughout the EU and after Jedi, and it's great. I love it, and I don't think that they could have done anything better with Luke. It was almost perfect with what they did with him. And take that and compare it with the new canon with what they did with Luke. Luke fails at rebuilding the Jedi Order. He fails at doing it, and then disappears on an island. Right? Like, come on. Is that really what the? It's like Luke was told by Yoda, "Pass on what you have learned." Well, he did, and it didn't go anywhere. Why would they write that? Well, they wrote it because the sequels are a reboot. That's the reason why they did it. The sequels are a reboot, and everything that Lucas wanted to give Luke, Han, and Leia, they gave it to the sequel cast. Rey's going to be the one establishing the Jedi Order, right? Not Luke. And I think that's probably the worst decision in the new canon by far. I don't mind. I know I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I'll get to my point in a second. But if Rey had been Luke's successor, that's different. If Luke had established a new Jedi Order and Rey became like his successor, that's fine. If Luke's Jedi Order was fragmented, at least it existed. I mean, that's fine too, because at least it still exists. It's just fragmented. Something happened to it. That's fine too. But to say he never rebuilds it, like I understand he built an academy, but it doesn't go anywhere. It falls, right? And he doesn't actually rebuild a proper Jedi Order, and all the Jedi die anyway. There's no survivors, other than Ben Solo himself. So take that and compare it with the EU, where he does rebuild the Jedi Order. He does rebuild it. He has a family. He builds it into a proper Jedi Order where Jedi are common in the galaxy again. It lasts well after his death, and after his death, yeah, it does become fragmented as well in the Legacy era, but it comes back together with the help of Luke's descendants, or specifically Cade, right? Cade Skywalker. And it eventually establishes the galactic triumvirate with the Fells and the Galactic Alliance, but the point is, that's what we got. Luke actually fulfilled his purpose, which was, the purpose he had after the original trilogy. After the Sith were gone, he did exactly what he was supposed to do, right? Which is, reestablish Jedi Order. That's the whole point with Yoda and Obi-Wan hiding him. It had nothing to do with, I guess the main purpose was to defeat Vader and Palpatine. But Yoda even says, pass on what you have learned, right? And he doesn't do that in Nuke. He tries to, but it fails. And I don't like that because it just completely negates any sort of progress that we had made in the OT. So that is my biggest problem with the new canon, and I don't know how someone could say that is better than what we got in the EU. The EU is actually feels like a proper continuation, and the new canon's like, what? It's like, why is this happening? I don't like to hate on the new canon on my channel. I mean, I know I tease Filoni a lot, but I don't like to hate on the new canon because this is not what this is about. But how can someone? My question is, how can someone honestly tell me the new canon version's better? So that's my question. Thanks everyone for watching, and y'all have a good rest of y'all's day.